Welcome back. A shocking story coming out of Brooklyn. An 18-year-old woman pulled over by the cops who found marijuana in the car. Woman says the two officers then took her to an unmarked police van and then subsequently raped her. The two officers didn't deny that they had sex with the woman. They said it was all consensual. And believe it or not, it is not illegal in New York State for an officer to have sex with someone in his or her own custody. And New York is not alone. 35 states do not specifically outlaw the practice. The two officers, Eddie Martins and Richard Hall, they have resigned from the force and they've pleaded not guilty. Now, Governor Cuomo has just made a move to close the loophole which would effectively make it illegal for officers to have sex with people in their custody. Well, yesterday, we spoke about this with Assemblywoman Shelley Mayer. She is running for state senate to fill the seat vacated by County Executive George Latimer in Westchester County. Shelley, as always, thank you.
Thank you.
I had to read this thing twice to make sure I got it right. That, leave to aside what the governor did, we'll talk about that, or is proposing, and we'll see what the legislature does, that it's the same thing. I know it's against the law if a corrections officer has sex with an inmate. One would stand to reason a person in power that has someone in their custody obviously can't have a consensual relationship because the person's going to be obviously compromised in making a decision or not. Leave the facts of this case aside as to whether or not they raped her or not. How is it possibly logical that a cop can have sex with a person that they cuffed and put in the back of a squad car?
Well, first place, it's an outrageous allegation, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. And, you know, our heart, first we got to make sure that we know that there was a real victim here. And we can't forget that. But the point is that the law is simply out of date. The New York law, as you said, with respect to corrections officers, expressly says that you cannot be deemed to have consented when you're in custody of a corrections officer. But it does not use the word police officer. So it's another one of these cases where the law is simply behind the times or out of step or never was updated, and we have to fix it. In fact, in the Assembly, we passed a bill that bipartisan unanimously to fix this and clarify that police officers, when they have someone in custody, a person simply by law cannot be deemed to have consented. To your point, the person has complete control over your physical being. It cannot be a consensual relationship. But we have to fix it, and this is what legislators should do. And the Assembly passed it, as I said. I am hopeful that the Senate Republicans move that bill onto the floor and get it voted on. Now the governor is forcing the issue to the front, credit to him, and saying, no, we're not going to sort of play politics with this. I'm putting it in the budget. So it's part of the budget bill. You're going to be forced to deal with this. And that's how
just to echo your point, the governor can't by fiat say that this is the new law in New York. Obviously, he's got to get passage, and he's now attached it. But I'm surprised. I think people have this perception that New York, being a really blue state, that it's got the most progressive laws in the books in terms of sentencing minors. Like we in North Carolina were the only ones where you could send to an adult facility. And there's other ones like this. I'm not saying it's the norm, but are you even sometimes surprised how New York is behind the rest of the country sometimes? Oh,
absolutely. And I think a good example is in voting rights. The fact we don't have early voting.
Yep.
I mean, you would think New York would be on the forefront of encouraging people to participate in the democratic process. And in fact, we're not. And frankly, without being unduly partisan, under the current configuration of the Senate majority, we can't get some bills to the floor of the Senate because it's controlled by a group that is blocking consideration of legislation. So this is a good example. This bill should just fly through both houses, bipartisan, unanimous vote. And I hope it does.
Yeah.
I hope it does before we get to the budget. But I think we do have a partisan divide that unfortunately has blocked us from being in the lead. To the point you make, we should be in the lead on so many of these issues. This shouldn't have been left out until someone came forward and truly was a victim. We should have fixed it before. But there's a number of other areas in which New York is behind other states and certainly not in the lead. And we're trying incrementally to fix it, but should we have to wait till something like this happens to fix a problem where you could be deemed to have consented to sex with someone who has you in the back seat of a squad car?
The more you read, and I suggest people do read the background of the story, 2 other guys were with this young woman at the time. The police sent them away. They kept her, went to an unmarked van. 2 hours later, they released her back basically in the same area where they found her, and there's even some security camera video that backs up the timeline from this woman's account. But this is just nuts. And especially in the Me Too era, I can't believe some of the debates we're still having right now as to what is permissible or not.
I agree. One thing I say is that, I think the law enforcement community will stand with us very strongly. The more there are clear limits on behavior, the better it is for our vast majority of wonderful law enforcement officials to do their jobs.
Right.
And they don't get tarnished with this stuff. They're doing the best they can. So when you have these things and the law doesn't prohibit it, it's a stain on all of them, and shame on that situation. We need to fix it.
Well, it's crazy. And as mentioned, it's a tight New York State Senate makeup right now, and conceivably your race, one of those that could literally tilt the balance of power in Albany. So we'll keep
Hope
a
it
look
does.
on that. Yeah, I'm sure you do. I almost called you senator, not yet, but
No.
Assemblywoman, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it.
Coming up next, we will pivot to politics and take a look at the debate about guns and whether or not that's causing a rift in the Republican Party. Plus, Russia, Dreamers, and much more with ABC News political director Rick Klein.